channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name's Emma and I cover primarily unsolved cases here on this channel. First off, I do want to apologize for not putting any videos out in the last couple of weeks. I definitely underestimated the amount of time this past semester's final exam period was going to take for me, and it took a lot. But I am now on holidays for the next few weeks before the winter semester starts, so I thought I would try to film as many videos as I can over this break for you guys, and possibly even early in January have a 5 to 7 day crime week for you. That being said, today we will be covering the case of 4-year-old Michael Dunhaee, who disappeared from Victoria, Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, in March 1991. Before we get into his case, I would like to reiterate, as per usual, that my intent with these videos is not to cause any disrespect or harm to anybody mentioned in these cases. It's simply to get the word out there so that hopefully these cases can be solved or people's missing loved ones can be brought home. And all of the sources that I've gathered my information from in this video will be listed down below. With that said, let's get into today's video. So Michael Dunhaee was born May 12th, 1996 to parents Crystal and Bruce Dunahee in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Victoria is the capital city of British Columbia, which is Canada's westernmost province. And the city has a population of about 92,000, and that statistic was as of 2017, so it's likely a little bit bigger than that now. And it sits on the very south end of Vancouver Island. The fact that Victoria is on an island and is only accessible by ferry is potentially very important to this case, so keep that in mind because we will be coming back to it later on in the video. In late 1990, Crystal and Bruce welcomed a baby girl, Caitlin, into their family, making them a happy family of 4. I unfortunately couldn't find very much information about Michael's early childhood, but I did see in some articles that he enjoyed fishing, playing outdoors, and was a very social child, always eager to play with other children when he was able to. So on Sunday, March 24th, 1991, the Dunahees drove to Blanchard Park Elementary School, which I've also seen called just Blanchard Elementary School. I'm not sure which one was correct. They drove there for a touch football tournament that Crystal, Michael's mother, was playing in that day. When they arrived at the school, Michael was quick to ask his mom if he could go play on the playground, on the school grounds. There were other kids playing there, and his mother told him, yep, go ahead, but not to go anywhere else until his dad came over to collect him before the game was going to start. And looking back on this moment later, Crystal said that she did feel some uneasiness that day, maybe a mother's intuition that something wasn't quite right or was going to happen, but as most people do, she brushed it aside and let her son go off and play with the other kids. After setting up for the football game and checking the previous game's scores, Bruce made his way to the playground to collect Michael to watch his mom play. But when Bruce got to the playground equipment, he couldn't see Michael anywhere. He looked around in case he just happened to be out of sight. But it didn't take long for Bruce and other adults in the vicinity to raise the alarm to all the people at the football tournament, and the games were immediately put on hold to search for Michael. There were about 50 people at the school field at that time, and they were all part of the initial search for Michael, but within half an hour of not being able to locate the boy, the police were called. Because Michael had disappeared in such a short time frame, it had only been 10 to 15 minutes since his mom had said, yeah, go play in the playground, and his dad had gone over and he wasn't there. His disappearance was immediately classified as an abduction. In fact, one of the initial police theories was that Michael may have even been abducted while walking across the parking lot from his parents' vehicle to the playground, which I'll put a map of the school area, an aerial view, on the screen for you here. You can take a look and you can see that it's literally the parking lot, and on one side of the parking lot is the football field, on one side of the parking lot is the playground, and it would be very easy to keep an eye on your child while on the football field, kind of have a direct line of sight from most of it. So it wasn't far at all. It wouldn't be unusual for a parent to be doing something at the field area of the school and have their child play on the playground equipment on the other side of the parking lot. At the time of his disappearance, Michael Dunhaee was 3 feet tall, weighed 51 pounds, and was beginning to show some freckles as spring was just starting in Vancouver. He was wearing a blue hooded jacket with a red lining and red cuffs, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt, multicolored rugby pants, and blue sneakers. His dad said that Michael had some characteristics that were pretty unique to him and might make him recognizable, such as rubbing both of his ears at the same time and being very meticulous about things such as the organization of the foods on his plate, for example. Following the typical missing child protocol, the Dunahees were of course the first ones to be looked at, and they were also cleared very early on as suspects. People who lived in the surrounding area and those who were at the football field that day were also cleared as suspects very early on, and so were all known sex offenders in the area. Police and volunteer searchers spent the rest of the day Michael disappeared, knocking on doors in the neighborhood, searching nearby wildlife areas, and asking everybody if they had seen Michael. A few hours into the search, police also began searching the ferry ports and all ferries leaving the island, but the search was to no avail, and the search for Michael Dunhaee quickly became the largest missing persons investigation in the history of Canada up until that point. It came out early on in the investigation that one young girl who had been at the playground with Michael remembered seeing a brown van with a middle-aged man in the parking lot that day, and this tip was jumped on by police at the time. Some other children playing on the playground also remembered Michael being there that day, giving credence to him making it across the parking lot prior to his disappearance, and according to those children, the group had been playing hide and seek. Police eventually did organize an elaborate reconstruction of the day's events, and they actually included this witness sighting of the brown van in that reconstruction, but that didn't bring forward any promising leads either. Disgustingly, the Dunahees were the victims of many prank calls and scams following Michael's disappearance, including someone claiming to have knowledge that Michael had been killed in a sacrificial ritual, and another person demanding a $10,000 ransom but then never calling back again. On a side note, personally, and I'm sure you can all agree, preying on a missing person's family in this way is so despicable, and I will never be able to understand why anyone would get pleasure from hurting family members of a victim in that sort of way. The TV show America's Most Wanted, which was a show that featured the stories of unsolved crimes hosted by John Walsh, featured Michael's story 3 different times over the years, helping spread word of Michael's disappearance all over North America and ultimately contributing to the 12,000 tips and 789 possible sightings the police had gotten between Michael's disappearance and 2011, which is when that statistic is from. I obviously can't get into all the tips and sightings that have come in about Michael over the years, but I do want to discuss some of them that I think might be the most important or valuable to this case. In 1991, after the first airing of the America's Most Wanted episode, a police officer in New Jersey called in to Victoria Police saying that he thought he had seen Michael at a convenience store accompanied by a middle-aged African-American man. Although this sighting literally came from the opposite side of the continent, Victoria Police did hold some weight to it since it had come from a police officer. Strangely, there were at least 2 other sightings that came in from New Jersey, both placing Michael in the company of an African-American man. But unfortunately, these sightings weren't ever able to be confirmed as Michael, but as far as I could find, they weren't ruled out as being him either. At one point, a jacket matching the one Michael was wearing when he disappeared showed up at a restaurant in a town in the British Columbia interior, sparking some hope that Michael was in the area and was in fact semi-close to home. But a few weeks later, the jacket was claimed by a woman whose daughter had accidentally left the jacket behind when they were eating there. A really strange lead in this case came in 2009 when 62-year-old self-proclaimed psychic Vernon Seitz of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, confessed to his psychiatrist that he had actually killed a young boy when he himself was only 12 years old and that he had knowledge of another child killing. and he asked her to call the police for him so he could confess. But by the time the police went to speak to Seitz, he was found to have passed away in his home of natural causes. However, when police searched the house, they recovered hundreds of items, including drawings of nude children, books on cannibalism, and newspaper clippings of missing children, including the missing poster of Michael Dunhaee. Obviously, this finding led to speculation that Seitz had been involved in Michael's disappearance in some way, because why else would he have had one of these missing posters in his house? When this all came to light, though, Crystal Dunahee was questioned about whether or not Vernon Seitz had ever contacted their family to offer his services as a psychic following Michael's disappearance, because this was something he tended to do, was insert himself into crimes as a psychic, and we don't know whether he was doing that honestly or whether he had ulterior motives. But Crystal said that although his name did sound familiar all those years later, she really couldn't be certain as to whether or not he had ever contacted them. Officially though, authorities don't believe that Vernon Seitz had anything to do with Michael's disappearance, and they haven't found anything that connects him to any homicides, including the one he confessed to his psychiatrist about. In 2013, hopes were raised again for the Dunahees when a man who looked remarkably similar to Michael's age progression photo came forward with suspicions that he was Michael Dunhaee, claiming to not have any memories before the age of 5, and saying that his family never really stayed in one place long during his childhood. However, this was once again a dead end when DNA testing proved that this man was not Michael. If Michael is still alive today, he would be 33 years old, and this coming March 2020, he will have been missing for 29 years. Because it's been so long since Michael disappeared, I do want to discuss some theories today, which I wouldn't always do, especially if the case is a little bit fresher. But with this case, I really think that as many brains as possible on this case can't hurt after all these years. The common ground for all of the theories that I'm going to talk about today is that Michael's disappearance was a crime of opportunity and was a stranger abduction. Stranger abductions are unfortunately the most difficult to solve because there's no connection to the family. There's not even always a connection to the area, and they just happen. And although they are the least common type of abduction, they are by far the most difficult to solve. So the first theory we're going to discuss is a popular and plausible theory that Michael was taken and sadly was killed shortly after his abduction. The main reason that this theory is often dismissed when talking about the Michael Dunhaee case is that, as I mentioned earlier, Victoria is a city on an island, and that island has limited space, and if Michael had been left somewhere, most people think that his body would have been found by now. And honestly, I tend to agree with that. I think that if Michael was killed and dumped somewhere, to not have been found by now, his remains would need to be either off of the island or on private property on the island. So the second theory I want to discuss is partially my own. It's some ideas that I've pieced together from listening to a couple podcasts on this case and reading a lot of articles online. And it's partially built off of some ideas that I heard Mike Brown and Scott Hemingway discuss on the Dark Poutine podcast when they covered Michael's case, which was a really, really good, comprehensive coverage of Michael's disappearance. It's a lot longer than this video is going to be, so if you do want to know a little bit more about Michael's disappearance, I would highly recommend heading over to their podcast and listening to their episode on this case. I believe it's episode 55. They discussed their belief that Michael had been lured away from the playground rather than snatched, since it was the middle of the day, there were a lot of people around, and the perpetrator likely would not want to risk Michael screaming or crying out. Since the kids were playing hide and seek, supposedly, they theorized that the abductor saw Michael and offered him their vehicle to hide in. And Michael, being 4 years old, would likely have agreed to that, thinking what an awesome place to hide. So that's kind of the idea that Mike and Scott had that I really agreed with and thought quite plausible, was the luring away giving a place to hide or offering, saying, can you help me find my dog? You know, that lure that we do all hear about. But now where my part of the theory comes in is if this type of lure was used to coax Michael away, he could have easily then been in the trunk or the back of a vehicle. And there are a few ferry ports on Vancouver Island. There are 3, I believe, including one run by Blackball Ferry Line, which takes passengers to Port Angeles, Washington. If I'm not saying that town right, I apologize. This port in particular is only about a 10-minute drive from the Blanchard School location, meaning that it's quite possible that somebody could have made it to that port before anyone even realized that Michael was missing, much less called the police. To add to this theory, from what I can gather and remember from my childhood, passports weren't needed to travel between Canada and the US until the mid-2000s. Between 2004 and 2007 is when those laws started being enacted. And then at the time of Michael's disappearance, passengers also did not have to leave their vehicle when they were on board a ferry. You were allowed to sit in your car throughout the journey if you wanted, whereas nowadays you actually do have to disembark your vehicle and go to one of the upper decks on the ferry. So I believe that it's quite possible that Michael was lured off of the playground, taken the 10-minute drive to the Blackball Ferry Port, and subsequently taken over the border. So keep in mind though, this is all my speculation. None of that is fact or proven or anything like that. That's just some ideas that I had piecing together some of the different theories that I'd heard out there. As I said at the beginning of this theories section, I think that at this point, any fresh ideas could be helpful in Michael's case in bringing him home. And I'm curious to know what you guys think of this case, if you've heard it before, if it's new to you, if this has sparked any thoughts or theories for you, so please let me know down below. And then that's all that I have for you today on the disappearance of Michael Dunhaee. If you have any information about this case, there is a $100,000 reward still outstanding, and you can call the Victoria Police Department's non-emergency line at 250-995-7654. Or you can report a tip anonymously through Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS or 1-800-222-8477. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you like this type of content, please subscribe. I would love to have you, and I'll see you next week with a new video. Bye!
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.